Welcome to America Uncanceled on CPAC Now. This is Matt Schlapp, and as I always have to apologize that my better half, Mercedes, is not with me. She's actually been on a voyage to the wonderful South Bend, Indiana, the home of the University of Notre Dame. Yes, the Fighting Irish. Sorry, all you out there who love to hate on Notre Dame, but it's kind of like a Schlapp family thing. And she'll be with me on the next show. And you all know through this show and through our social media that we've started a new center to combat human trafficking. And how did that happen? Well, that happened because we've been going overseas, including to CPAC, Mexico, and meeting the victims of this terrible human tragedy. It's real, despite what the media is trying to tell you. And the victims have names and they have faces, and many have come to our CPAC in America and talked about their stories, which are just harrowing. And one of those people that goes with us around the world is Jack Posobiec. And Jack, who's the editor of Human Events, was with us in Mexico, and he was with us recently when we went to the Museum of the Bible and had this amazing premiere for this amazing movie, The Sound of Freedom, the product of 8 years and under the management of our CPAC partner in Mexico, Eduardo Verostegui, who's a wonderful human being, a believer, and someone who helped develop the project and understands the stories because he's the one who's led us in these different countries to meet the victims. So, hey, Jack, thanks for joining us again on America Uncanceled.
Well, thanks, Matt, so much, not only for having me here, but also, I mean, it's just been incredible to see some of these things. And I realize that when I'm thinking of it, that, you know, for someone who's watched this movie, that and we'll tell the story of that in a minute, but you mentioned how we had visited this center down in Mexico for actually girls who had been trafficked that had been saved. And I realized that this is what the media is playing into. The media that is now attacking Sound of Freedom is playing into this idea that most people haven't had those experiences through CPAC, through the center that you and Mercedes have set up. They aren't aware of these things that are absolutely 100% real. And that's why I think it's vital for CPAC to set up a center to be able, and obviously it's very sensitive to be able to tell these stories, but to share the experiences like I had going down, and with there we are with Sarah Carter driving. She's driving somehow, which is a terrible idea.
That's true.
I have no idea how I let you talk me into that. But, you know, so Sarah's like, oh, get in the van, you know. So Sarah's driving, and she tells us, oh, we're going to a safe house. Here are your blindfolds. And she passes the blindfolds out. We're like, what the heck is going on here, Sarah? And what she ends up doing is taking us to a home for young girls who have been saved, in some cases, maybe who are in situations that are similar, hopefully not as horrific, but similar to what is depicted in Sound of Freedom, who have been saved either by law enforcement or humanitarian volunteers, like, again, like is depicted in the film as Tim Ballard. And that, but then the question, of course, becomes, what then, right? What do the kids just go home and everything's better? Well, in some cases, the kids don't have homes to go to. In some cases, they are orphans. In some cases, they came from broken homes and have bad situations and don't want to go back. And so, you know, that's where a lot of these places are setting up. And I think it's amazing that Turning Point, or excuse me, that CPAC, I came through Turning Point, that CPAC was setting it in and is building those relationships and is now building a center to really respond to this ridiculous media smear that what's depicted in Sound of Freedom isn't real, that it's a tinfoil conspiracy thought up. But guess what, folks? It's a true story, and I'm sorry. And I wish it wasn't. I wish it was a conspiracy. I wish it was fake. I wish that none of this were happening. But I'm sorry, I've been to Mexico and I've met the girls, and I'm here to tell you that it's 100% real.
So CNN
that's why we need to tell these stories.
Jack, CNN and all these outlets are out there saying this is like a QAnon thing. They're saying that this is phony numbers and it's hyped. And so it's hard for you and I because we've met the kids, so we know that it's real. We've met the people that put those houses together, safe houses for the kids. We went to a girls' home. We also went to a boys' home. We also went to an orphanage with 4,000 young kids, also coming from terrible circumstances. So this is a real issue. They tell us it's hyped, but yet they absolutely have been the ones not covering the story. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein had a whole corrupt island system where VIPs and the super elite and the wealthy, for years and years, maybe decades, for a very long time, were committing terrible, heinous crimes against young people. And the major media turned its eye away, most likely because maybe they had friends or maybe they were complicit or for whatever reason they didn't want to cover the story. Hollywood, with the whole Me Too movement, has not clean hands when it comes to exploitation of young people to try to give them this promise that they'll have some great career. What ends up happening to a lot of them is they just get abused. So why are we shocked that they don't want to cover the story?
And it was really amazing for me because in one case of Rolling Stone, who was one of, I think, probably the most egregious, and yeah, the CNN did their piece and Washington Post, but Rolling Stone just did this immense smear. And what people need to understand is that Rolling Stone's new management, and they've brought over the editor, Noah Shackman, from the Daily Beast, which is just a far left Media Matters style outlet. They brought him over to be the new editor for Rolling Stone. But Noah Shackman is the exact same guy who was caught, and one of his own reporters blew the whistle on him because when he wrote up the story, or I should say she wrote up the story originally, from the ABC producer James Gordon Meek, when he had been, and remember this, it's maybe a year ago, and they said James Gordon Meek, he's this huge, he was ABC, and he's the star producer. He's involved in Afghanistan, all this stuff, and he's gone missing. And Rolling Stone wrote up the article that he was missing, and nobody knew what it was, and had been found downrange. Well, it later found out that he was in possession of child pornography, and it turns out that Rolling Stone knew that the ABC producer, James Gordon Meek, was in possession. This is just this year. Was in possession of this. But Noah Shackman came in and stealth edited the report to make it look like it was a vague reason that he had been arrested. And it wasn't until later that other reports came out. The indictment finally came out. By the way, he did plead guilty. And all of this was out. But Noah Shackman wanted to run cover for him because I guess they were buddy-buddy over something. And those same Noah Shackman is going to go and put a green light on a huge smear piece on Sound of Freedom when he's got buddies that were involved in, now not in trafficking, but in the receipt of material from children that have been exploited. And I say, there's something broken with our media. But it's funny. I was actually talking to, all right, I'll just say it. He wouldn't care if I said this publicly. I was talking to Eduardo about this just a few days ago. He said, Jack, they're coming after us. They turned the machine on us, and we've smashed records. We've smashed this idea, and I keep saying we'll talk about the premiere, but he said I never expected them to treat it this way. And I said, Eduardo, those are the best reviews you could possibly have.
That's right. Yeah.
Those are rave reviews. Are you kidding me? If you've got Rolling Stone and the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN saying don't see this movie, that goes to show you how terrified they are of this movie's success.
Do you know what's kind of sad is I want them to be right. When you watch this movie, and you and I were at the premiere, Mercy was at the premiere, we had hundreds of people at the Museum of the Bible. A lot of our friends in the movement were there. And, as the movie's unfolding, it's so uncomfortable. They do a good job with making you feel uncomfortable, but it's not just like so vivid that you just can't sit through it. But I want to believe.
I was close, man. I got to say, I was looking at the door.
Yeah, me too.
There were a couple times. They walk you because they, and I don't want to give it away for people that haven't seen it, but they walk you right up
to it,
very close to the edge, closer than, and it's important that they do this, right? They have to do this, and you don't want them, and you know what it's going to be, right? Logically, and you know what's coming. But it's the only time where I remember I'm sitting in a movie and it's almost like in a horror movie, right? Where you're saying,
yeah.
I have to close my eyes. I don't want to stop. I can't do it. Don't show me any more of them. I want the movie to stop. And I'm looking at the exit, and I'm looking at the exit. I actually had my rosary in my pocket, so I pulled it out and I started praying my rosary right there in the premiere. Just I did the entire rosary. And Tanya, my wife's there with me. She thought I was talking to her. She's like, "Don't talk." I was like, "No, I'm not. I'm just going through my Hail Marys."
It's so unsettling.
Then they take the pressure off. They do take the pressure off.
Yep.
But there are a few scenes where they just keep ratcheting it up to the point where I mean, it's an experience. You go through an experience watching this film. You go through an emotional experience when you realize that you know, even if you think you understand the horror that are going through this, they do such a great job of they don't treat it as statistics. They don't treat it as data. It's, oh, this is 4,000, 8,000. No, they tell you the story, and they put you in the room. They put you in the room while something like this is happening, and you see these sickos and what they do to the kids, and that's what it just triggers a lot. I mean,
it triggers a lot. It triggers a lot, and I found myself wanting the critics to be right. Like, oh, I hope this is made up. I hope it's hyped. I wish it wasn't true, because there's a lot of things you can see on a screen that you know aren't virtuous, but they don't make you sick. This just literally makes you physically sick when you think about it. And then when you meet these victims, and anybody who wants to come with us overseas or come to CPAC, the next big one, might even be in Arizona. We're working on the details of that now, but we're going to make sure we have the people who want to be public to tell their story there to tell their story. And one of the reasons we're doing this center, by the way, Mercy deserves the credit on the CPAC side on this, because I'm always like the guy worrying about every nickel and dime and how are we going to pay for this and how are we going to do that. And she believes that CPAC has to be more than just about politics. It has to be about a moral cause to uphold human dignity. And she's right, of course, and I should quit worrying about nickels and dimes. But the point is that we have a unique ability, because we rate every state legislator, we rate every state senator, state rep, every United States senator, United States congressman. We're getting into rating governors. You know, we have a real ability to impact the laws in all 50 states in the nation's capital. And from what my understanding is of things, it shouldn't shock us with what we see going on at DOJ, but we have some pretty loose laws around questions of how kids are exploited sexually.
That's exactly right, and this is something that it's touched on briefly in the film, but essentially you see this scene where the child is about to be trafficked from Mexico into the United States, and it is a U.S. border scene. And no, it's not done in some partisan way, you know, or it comes out like, well, thank goodness Donald Trump is president. No, there's nothing like that. It's essentially because Jim Caviezel's character, you know, who's playing Tim Ballard, he knows that the kid is coming across, so he's waiting for this specific example. But the other side of it is, if you're just trafficking kids across the border, I mean, it looks like it's a you know, an uncle with his, and I think he tries to come up with some cover story. Oh, it's my nephew, it's my wife's kid or something. But then you get into these questions of how the Biden administration has done away with DNA testing of kids at the border that are picked up illegally. They've done away with some of these questions of, and remember, they called it, oh, it's family separation. It's family separation. Well, if you're not actually checking that they are in the same family, then you don't know if it's family separation, because you might call it family separation, but what those agents are actually trying to do is verify if these children are being trafficked across the border and that we're explicit in it, complicit in it. And it turns out that, guess what? If we're not actually setting this up, so all the while that I'm watching the movie, I'm running through the ramifications of, well, wait a minute, if that's the only way that you can check, and we're not doing this and we're not doing this, it's kind of like 9/11. We all thought about, you know, airline security differently. That when you think about border security from this perspective, you realize that if we are not securing, and I don't mean to make this political, but if you're not actually looking for this at the border, then there's a million ways that you can do it.
Well, and it got worse. So I told you and I were talking right before we went live that, you know, they started this 8 years ago. In talking to Tim Ballard, and
Yes.
And the movie is old. It's like 5 years old because they couldn't find a studio to run it. Can you imagine, you know, CNN, Rolling Stone, Daily Beast, all these people that are, you know, belching on it and worse, This situation is dramatically worse because 5 years ago, the movie depicts a child being trafficked through, an opening in the border through the road that goes right up to the Czech zone there. Today, with the millions of people that have come in to America illegally, we know it's documented. You can see it on your TV every night. The kids that are coming in over the border, just streaming over the border. So whatever's depicted in the movie is actually much worse today.
Well, that's right, and I do think that in a way, and I said this to Eduardo, and I'll say it publicly, that in a sense, where we are in the culture right now, with wokeness and the craziness that's been pushed by so much of Hollywood over those last 5 years since the film was made, and while it's been in the can, as they say, before it was actually released, it's almost like it came out at the perfect moment.
Yeah.
Because it hit a perfect storm of reaching critical mass. Keep in mind, 5 years ago, Angel Studios barely existed. The Chosen, I think, was just getting started, or maybe it just gone on air, and that's really what put them on the map. And then these new distribution, and number one plays the biggest arm of that. So they hadn't even built this distribution network yet, and the pay it forward system, which was able to come into great success for really front loading these tickets and front loading these visions. And so it's almost like it actually came out at the perfect time.
And Jack, can I bring up one thing else?
It's almost like this was the time it was supposed to come out.
You got to think about this too, because we're a big movie family, even though there's really nothing to see anymore. And COVID really killed the business, Chinese Corona, for a number of years. So it's interesting.
So
God's hand and timing in this is kind of perfect because movie theaters are, they're back open. They've found a way, I guess, to get profitable again. And I feel like it's one of these movies. I saw The Passion of the Christ in a movie theater. Now, I've only watched that movie one time. I don't think I could ever watch it again. I think it's a one and done. Talk about an emotional movie. This is another one of these examples. It's something you're going to want to tell your kids that you saw. It's something you're going to want to see kids of a certain age to see it with them. It's something, it'll be a bonding experience for people that believe that while we're on this earth, we need to stand up for the little ones. And but it's not something I don't think I hate to tell Eduardo and the creators and the owners of the movie, I'd love to tell them I'd love to see this every week, but this is not Indiana Jones. This is not Star Wars. This is a tough one.
Movie. No.
What did you say?
I said it's not a popcorn movie.
No popcorn. That's exactly right.
Not even a little bit. And it's something where, and I'll just say, by the way, that even in the past, I guess it's been a month really since you held the premiere. And look, when we came to the Museum of the Bible, which I love, Museum of the Bible, we take the kids there. I've been there so many times. It's just great. It's especially on a rainy day in DC. You just go in and you learn about the Bible and interact, and it's great for kids. But it's also, if you're into the history of the Bible, they have stuff for that as well. So I like, the different parchments and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and there's whole sections on that. So just get lost in that. Look, we knew that it was a special movie. Right, it sounds cliche. We say, I knew it was special, but I didn't know. But it's true. It's true in this case. We knew it was special. We knew it would have been made in a special way. It had very special people that were involved in the creation. Mel Gibson apparently came in to kind of consult on some of the final edits in it, and just that really tightening things up in the third act. And then we knew it was important. And so I said, look, I'm just going to get on my show and start banging the drum. And I did the next morning, and people weren't even sure what Sound of Freedom was. And I said, just play the trailer, because I've had an experience and I've seen something and I need people to see this. And then Steve Bannon did it on War Room, and more people started doing it. I had no clue that this thing would actually become the #1 movie in America. I had no, because I thought it'd be like, it's something that conservatives go see and Christians and hopefully it'll be big. Like, I wanted a lot of people to see it. This has far exceeded my expectations for where it would go. Far exceeded. It has actually become a cultural phenomenon, and you notice that all those attacks that we just talked about, whether it's ABC or CNN, et cetera, Washington Post, Rolling Stone, those didn't happen until after it beat Indiana Jones at the box office on the 4th of July. They didn't care about the movie until then. And then it got too
Right.
big. And that's when Bob Iger and Disney and all those guys got on the phone and they started using their, Disney, the most powerful entertainment company on the face of the planet. When you've got their target, that's when the attacks start coming in. But I think it's also because the theaters had already locked in to the movie. It's like, what do you even do? The horse is out of the barn at that point, and it's just getting bigger and bigger. So every time they tell people, don't see this movie, people are telling me, I just bought 10 more tickets. I just bought 20 more tickets. I just did the pay it forward. I just bought tickets. For Dana White coming out and telling everybody he's buying UFC, every employee to go see it. Patrick Bet-David. It's become a people's movie. It's actually become a people's movie.
So I want to bring this back to the woke. You brought up Bob Iger, Disney. Disney's really taken it on the chops financially by their full embrace of woke. Obviously, Bud Light has so many examples. I would even say Fox News has. These companies are really, you can see by their social media feeds that they're all in on woke. And it started with George Floyd and BLM and giving millions of dollars to what eventually became obvious as a corrupt organization. But I look at this whole, we just went through Pride Month and you see a lot of transgender flags in our neighborhood. You see it on the buildings that our president oversees and put these flags out. There seems to be a desire to normalize this idea of what we would have called pedophilia, but now they're calling it, minor attracted person. So when you bring up this idea, you have the gay community, but now you have this whole, this alphabet soup that surrounds it, including the question mark, and you have the transgender flag, which basically, if you were to ask somebody who puts that flag up, who's included in that flag? And they'd say anybody. Any sexual preference you could ever imagine is included on that flag. And this idea to try to normalize sex with kids or sexualizing kids by calling it, minor attracted person. I think we see the sleight of hand here, which is they're trying to cover it up and not portray the facts of what this illegal activity that's happening, but they're also trying to normalize it within our schools. This idea that, hey, sex is different for every person, and some people will want to have sex with kids, and some kids will want to change their gender, and some young kids will want to experiment with this, that, or the other thing. It's really, really, really evil and repugnant stuff. Do you think we've made any progress on shining a light on what they're up to?
No, I think we have, and actually one of my good friends lives with TikTok. I mean, you can just go to her feed every day, and you mentioned COVID a minute ago. One of the silver linings of COVID is that because of Zoom schools, it finally put parents basically over the shoulders of their kids and saw what the people in those schools were teaching and what they were doing to the children, and bringing up these highly sexualized topics, highly charged topics. And then, as Libs of TikTok has documented for us, and that's what she is, she's a documentarian. They always say she's a smear artist, taking things out of context. All she does is post the videos
that other
people have already posted. She doesn't say anything, right? She barely adds commentary other than that's disgusting. And so now that we have a window into this, and look, this isn't the first time throughout history that societies have flirted with these types of movements, gender fluidity, or opening up the Pandora's box of sexuality. You can see this in Weimar Germany, the decadence of Berlin in those years. You saw this in parts of the Middle East, etc. They always trigger a massive backlash, a massive pendulum swing, and I think that's what you're seeing now. And so in a sense, right, in almost a spiritual sense, even though there's nothing like that in the film. There's no transgenderism. There's no, obviously, if their man on boy is depicted, but there's nothing directly homosexual, I would say, other than that, which is a separate category. You do have this massive backlash that I think The Sound of Freedom was able to plug into and tap into in the sort of spiritual energy and anger, just palpable anger that's out there of people who say, I want to do something, I'm sick of this, I'm tired of this. I want to fight back. Disney became an avatar of that. And even though the Indiana Jones film isn't, and from what I've been told, it's actually not particularly all that woke itself, just in the film itself. But being run through Disney was enough. And sorry, Harrison Ford, I actually made a joke tweet about that. I said, in the end, how ironic is it that Indiana Jones chose poorly? That's little Last Crusade reference there, Holy Grail. There you go.
Right.
The best one, by the way. That it was able to tap into all of this, and so you have this huge juxtaposition of one of the greatest movie franchises of the last generation, Indiana Jones, being falling flat, while this upstart people's movement underdog of a film is going up, and the whole media is telling people not to see it. They've got no marketing budget. If anything, they've got an anti-marketing budget, because there's the idea is that you want to go to these different publications and get them to promote your film, and then get a good Rotten Tomatoes score, and then everybody goes sees it and you make some money. That's the film business. But Sound of Freedom has tapped into so many of these things. Mel Gibson, Tim Ballard, Jim Caviezel, Eduardo, that have been involved in all of it, have all been able to tap into these issues that have run virulent throughout our country right now, and that palpable anger, because it's given people an outlet for all of those feelings and emotions, that they can express them through this film. And so I feel like there's almost a catharsis in seeing it from just an emotional standpoint, but then also, and I'm so glad that you're here to tell us about the new center, because the main thing that I get when people see this movie, and I've
what
got
can I do?
Every comment, what can I do?
Yep.
How do I get involved? What's the next step? Because it activates people. It activates them, and it shows them that, guess what? This is real. This is going on. We've been getting at Human Events. I'll just tell you, we haven't even had a chance to be able to go through all of the stories, but people have been coming to us with stories that say, this one woman reached out to us. I don't even know how to write it up exactly, because obviously we have to report it and fact check, but I'll just, with those caveats, I mean, she said to me, I was trafficked by my father. She said I was trafficked by my father when
That's
I was
not
young.
an unusual story, sadly.
And she was saying, and it was right in public. She said what we would do is we would go to a department store, and he would take me to the dressing room, and he would take me in, and then he would leave, and another man would come, and then I'd walk out with the other man, and that was it. And that was the handoff. And you could do that at Disney, you could do that at an amusement park, you could do that at a baseball game, you could do that anywhere, right in public. And who would think to look? And then you would go off and you'd be with that man for a while, and then the handoff would happen again. And she was saying that she didn't even conceptualize that there was anything wrong, because when you're that age, you have no idea, right? You have no idea. And so she keeps saying, why didn't I run away? Why didn't I do this? But she always felt that she was safe because it's what her father wanted her to do. And look, I think of this as I've got two little toddlers right now, and as a dad, it affects you differently. And so even though it's not a story that I, maybe we'll find a way to write it up as an op-ed or something and say, well, this is this person's, we're not reporting it in terms of, like, I don't want to make accusations against anyone specifically, but these stories are real, right? These stories are real.
That's right.
And they need to be told, because unfortunately this has been happening at a record pace, and the United States is the #1 destination of it, and that's a huge problem.
There's a pastor here in the area from McLean Bible who famously says, now what, when he's done with a sermon. And that's kind of been our CPAC theme. Dan Schneider, our former executive director, used to always say that, like, someone can give a great speech, we can have a fiery debate, but then what do you do? And that's really how we check ourselves as an organization, which is, yes, you can have a big social media presence. Yes, you can raise a lot of money. You can do all these things, but what are you making a difference? And I think that's the thing I'm the most proud of is I think we've made a real difference. And I think what my wife is doing with setting up this center is going to help a lot of kids. And I think what we do when we go overseas, Jack, I always have struggled with the words because, we're anti-globalists, we're not globalists. I want to be Klaus Schwab's worst nightmare at CPAC, but people say, what are you going overseas for? So the point is this, which is we've got to coordinate with conservatives all over the world who view America as a leader in so many ways. And when we go overseas, we learn a lot, and we take that back to make our country better. And so as we do these CPACs all over the world, don't think we're getting distracted or we're taking our eyes off the ball. We're helping build up conservatives, classical liberals, whatever you want to call them, populists in these other countries, so that they have the courage to do what it takes to take their country. It's interesting, everywhere we've gone with these CPACs, it just seems like they're facing a battle similar to ours. You have Brazil, and you have this whole election controversy, and how do they handle their elections? You have, when we do CPACs in Japan, which we'll do at the end of the year, or Korea, you have this whole question about, is China our friend or our foe? I think we now have that answer pretty clear. Is the Western Hemisphere, Central and South America, is it hopelessly lost to the left? In Mexico, we put a stake in the ground, Eduardo did, and said, you're not going to be able to take all of our kids and turn them into mindless Marxists. And the Marxists turned out to protest us because of it. Hungary, where we just recently returned from, where Prime Minister Orban is thumbing his nose at the EU, and now you have this new gutsy prime minister in Italy who has her own path, but doing something similar. So it's quite an interesting time to be alive, and I can't think it's accidental that these countries want us in all these places.
Well, I think what you have, though, is because we are dealing with global issues. I mean, whether it's Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset, whether it's the Chinese Communist Party, whether it's the influence of child sex trafficking, these are global issues inherently. And so what you need is, obviously it's funny because obviously it's anti-globalist, but it's a coalition of nationalists.
Yeah, that's right.
So so you have conservatives in Japan, you have conservatives in Brazil, you have conservatives in Mexico and America, and not just conservatives, but just nationalists, just patriots, people who love their country, people who don't want to see these things happening. I mean, people will say, oh, you conservatives, you hate Mexico so much. Well, Sound of Freedom was made by a Mexican, right?
That's right.
It's like we hate crime and criminality and the exploitation of our laws, the exploitation of people. I don't think you'd be hard pressed to find a conservative, I think, that says they hate the people. It's just that they love the people of our own country so much that we want those to be treated well. I always say my line about the wall is which I think President Trump has adopted, but was always, you don't lock your door at night because you hate the people outside. It's because you love the people inside. That's what the wall is about. It's about protection. It's about guarding. It's why I have a Ring camera. It's like this is why we do these things. It's why all of us have them. And so you mentioned that line. There's a line at the end of, or I guess it used to be at the end of the Catholic Mass, but the new missals don't seem to have it as much, the new translation. But the line used to always be, "Go forth to love and serve the Lord."
That's right.
And I loved that line. Yeah. Go forth to love and serve the Lord, because to me that was an order. It was a challenge. It was a mission. All right, we've given you the teaching. We've given you the explanation for the week. You've received communion. Go. Now it's up to you to spend the rest of the week serving and doing your part, and then you'll come back again, and we'll come and we'll give you another mission. And it's not like I gave it the office and I'm good to go. No, you have a mission in this world. This is, and if you are a Christian, if you are a believer, this is what we're called to do. We are called to be in the world, but not of the world. And it would be easy. It would be so easy to say, and you talk about the internationalism of it. Well, if you've got kids from the movie shows, kids in Honduras that are brought to Colombia, some are sent down further to Colombia, but the very first scene, it's a guy in California. It's a guy in Jalisco, California, who's uploading images that are then sent from Colombia of the Honduran kid, and then essentially sharing them to his network on the dark web in the United States and other places. And even more horrifically, there are times where it's not just images, but it's live videos where you could be, these pedophiles will go online, and then there's a kid, and the kid might be in Thailand, the kid might be in the Philippines, the kid could be anywhere. Unfortunately now, and it just has to be said, with Ukraine, with the refugees coming out of Ukraine, there were people who, in the process of, as this film was coming out, there was a guy who was arrested at the border between Ukraine and Romania, who had just gone up to one of the women there, and I was over there, and we went to the border, and my brother and I went all the way in, and you see them at the train stations, and so the men are forced to stay in Ukraine right now, so the women and children come out. They don't know where they're going next. They don't know where their next meal is going to be. They don't know whether they're going to sleep with a roof over their heads. And if you're there with a kid or a couple of kids, you're terrified, and maybe you haven't eaten, maybe you haven't slept. And along comes this guy, and he says, "Oh, I run an adoption service, and I run an adoption service for children in war torn areas, and you're in luck because they're looking for kids, they're taking kids in right now. We'll bring them over to Western Europe, and by the way, we'll compensate you $5,000 as an adoption fee that we'll pay to you. I'll give you the first 1,000 of them now, and I can take your child directly from." And look, when you're in dire straits, all you're thinking about is the welfare of your kids, but you're not thinking straight.
Yep.
And these women, and this has been done a couple of times, had given over in this case it was 11-month-old boy, had been given to the traffickers, and he had given them $1,000 US cash, and they picked him up at the border. They were able to save the baby, but they said this had been done, this was the third or fourth time, and they were already on the lookout for this specific gang, and that the kids were being sent to places in the Middle East, the kids were being sent to places across Europe. I mean, it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. And when, and then Tim Ballard will go and just talk about it. He'll go and talk about it, and immediately he gets smeared, even though he's talking about specific operations that he's worked on.
That's right. It's crazy. And the best line in the movie, of course, is God's kids are not for sale. And it's a nice motto for us all to remember. And we appreciate you evangelizing the movie, Jack. We appreciate your friendship as we go around the world trying to highlight these important issues. Thanks for being with us again. Keep up the great work. And I will tell you, I don't know how the new missile ends Mass. You've stumped me on that. I will say this. In Virginia, we end Mass with our prayer to the Archangel Michael. And it's a powerful prayer. If you don't know that prayer, go look it up, because it's one thing to say go in peace, but we might be in a different age where we have to leave ready for the spiritual war that's so clearly happening all around us. You agree, Jack?
I say the prayer to St. Michael every single night with my son before we go to bed.
Yeah, it's a good one. If you don't know what we're talking about, look it up. It's the prayer of our age. Jack Posobiec, thanks for joining us again, and thank you all for tuning in to America UnCanceled. It's hard to up this show, but we'll be back at you with all the important issues that are happening in our country, all the politics that are happening in our country. It's an important time for all of us. God bless.
God bless.